Hello. Welcome to the Weather Skool podcast, where we dive into the world of meteorology, but with a twist. This isn't just about weather forecasts and storm tracking. We're here to hear the stories behind the meteorologists themselves. You'll get to know the people who bring you the weather every day, what drives them, what challenges they've faced, and how their personal journeys shape the work they do. If you're passionate about weather or curious about the lives of those who predict it, you're in the right place. So jump in as we explore the people behind the forecasts and discover what makes meteorologists truly unique. Welcome to Weather Skool, and this is the Weather Skool podcast project.
All right, hey, I am Justin Kiefer. I have the Weather Skool community on theskool.com, and I'm also a professional meteorologist on a television station. And joining me today for today's episode of the Weather Skool podcast project is Erika Mrazik. Erika is also a meteorologist, and we work together at a TV station in Clarksburg, West Virginia, which is a NBC, ABC television station owned by the Nexstar Media Group, and we are happy to work together. It's been a very short working career together, but it's also been very rewarding as well. So, Erika, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. One thing that I would like to just get started with, first of all, is you have a local tie to the area in some respects. Clarksburg, West Virginia is in an area called North Central West Virginia. So if you don't know where that is, look for Pittsburgh and then look south a couple hours. And that's where we are. But Pittsburgh is your hometown. So tell us a little bit about growing up there.
Yeah, so I grew up 20 minutes north of downtown Pittsburgh in a town called Wexford. And I love growing up there. It's sort of similar to West Virginia in terms of the climate and part of the culture. But it's been great. I went to high school at North Allegheny, and my family lives there. I like it. And I'm not too far, so I get to go home sometimes. It's only about 2 hours from here.
That's an interesting point, because early on in a lot of, first of all, Erika's professional television meteorology career is all of about 4 months now.
Yes.
So it's good to be in a place where you can go visit family, because a lot of people who come out of college have to go work in a far off place in their first job. I know several people whose first job was thousands of miles away from where they went to college or grew up. So I think that it's good because you can stay grounded with your family close by. Tell us a little bit about, from your early on or out of high school, how you got to pursue a meteorology degree and then a television career in meteorology. Kind of go through some steps on how that unfolded.
Okay, so this is going to be a long story and kind of bounces around a little bit. But I'll start from when I was like 3 or 4 years old. My parents would always get the newspaper in the mail every day. So before school, I would always look at the weather page and read all the forecasts, which it was simple. It was like today's high temperature tomorrow and, for all the cities in the U.S. And they would have a little map. So I'd always read that, and I'd always ask my parents or grandparents, like, oh, what does this sign mean, or things like that. So it was an interest from when I was young. And then, whenever you're 10, people are like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was always like, oh, I wanted to be a weather person. But then that kind of went to the wayside because I joined a ballet school. So my focus was like completely on dance, and I wanted to be a professional dancer. So I just totally forgot about the weather and my interest in that, because I had one that kind of went over that interest. And then I kind of had an identity crisis when I was applying to colleges because I was kind of deciding if I wanted a dance career or not. So I went to college as a dance major, but then I switched because you don't need a college degree to be a professional dancer. So it was kind of like, this is a waste of my time and money. So I randomly picked health science, and I was like, I'll be a physical therapist, because I gave up the dancing because it's not a stable lifestyle, and the career doesn't last you that long. You can only be a professional dancer / athlete until you're, I don't know, maybe 35. So I was looking for a more stable path. So I thought about being a physical therapist, since that's what I had a lot of when I was dancing. But then I realized I didn't like that and that wasn't my calling. And basically, one day out of the blue, I woke up in the summertime and this is going to sound cliche, but I just like looked at the sky and I was like, oh yeah, I used to love the weather. Why don't I rekindle that and
Wow.
change my major? And that's what I did. And here I am. But I got lucky because I changed my major very late in my school lifetime, but I still was able to graduate in 5 years, even though I switched my major right before senior year because some of my classes overlapped and stuff. So
Yeah.
I was fortunate for that.
That's fascinating to me. That like you said, it may sound cliche, but you just saw the sky and it sort of hit that nerve of when you were a kid and you looked at those weather pages on the back of the newspaper. That's really, really interesting because I've got somewhat of a similar story in my own right because my professional baseball career ended when I was in high school. I had these goals, these plans, these dreams about playing professional baseball, and then that didn't pan out after I got hurt in high school, and it's like I just didn't pursue it. And so meandering through college, I had a sort of a counselor sitting down with in her office, and she said, "Well, what do you like?" And I said, "Well, I like the weather." And it was sort of existential. So I don't know why I said that. And so we immediately started looking at schools that were nearby that offered meteorology programs, and that's how I got into a meteorology program. And it was close to home. So I chose one where I could get there in like half a day's drive or even less. It was about 3 hours away from where I was growing up. But that goes back to the point when I was a kid. My brother, I have a big family, and my next oldest brother and I had our own little weather station. I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and we put it out in the backyard and had an anemometer and a thermometer, and we make weather logs. And we would listen on shortwave radio to weather broadcasts from around the country. And I remember listening to Hurricane Camille hit the coast near Louisiana, Mississippi when I was a little kid, and we were listening to a shortwave radio in the middle of the night to this broadcast from Louisiana. And so you flash ahead to that conversation from in college. Well, what do you like? I said, well, I like the weather. And so that the ball starts rolling. So it's an interesting kind of similarity in that story, even though it's so many years apart. But fascinating. I appreciate you sharing that. And so you went to the Ohio State University. I just want to make that clear
I did.
because you can't say
The bees patent now, we all make a big deal about it.
I recently saw a vanity license plate and it was an Ohio plate and it just said the. It was just the word the. So
Yeah,
I thought,
people have merch like that. We bought my grandpa a hat that just says the on it in red letters.
perfect,
Hence, I
perfect.
wore scarlet. Just kidding, I didn't do that on purpose.
So, there's a lot of fields out there in meteorology, and you're a senior in college. How did it come about where you were able to work into any sort of a television career? How did that begin for you?
Um, so my first time ever being exposed to something on the TV was our club at school called the Scarlet and Gray Forecasting Team. It was at the time it was more informal. Now since it's been going for a couple years, it's more developed. But it would just be a couple kids that would get a group together, do some forecasting for an hour, and then one of them would do the broadcast for that day. And it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so people got to take turns. So that was the first time I ever was exposed to any filming like that. And it was really scary. My first broadcast, it was bad. It took me an hour to film a less than 1 minute piece. But that was the first time I ever did something like TV. But I always knew I wanted to pick TV as my sector um, because I didn't know about the other sectors, to be honest, when I first changed my major.
Yeah.
Our teachers would start talking about the National Weather Service or things in the private sector, and I know it. I was like, wait, what? There's like other things besides TV.
Right.
But
Right.
with dancing, it's kind of like performative and artistic, and I feel like with TV, it's kind of sort of similar in aspects like that. Obviously, it's different in science, and you're delivering information to help people,
Yeah.
but I feel like presenting it's sort of an art. Um, but I got more into TV during my internship last summer. So it was between my fourth year and my fifth year of college. And I did an internship in Nashville for 3 months. So it was at a local TV station. It was really cool. And I got to practice for the green screen about once a week, got to watch the morning newscast every day. And yeah, was a great experience.
Yeah, I think internships are great. If you can get at a TV station where you can get some hands-on sort of experience with the various opportunities, because some TV stations you can intern, but you don't you may not get to the green wall, and the green screen obviously is the chroma key area where if you're watching this video, chroma key is a term. The green screen, everybody sort of knows about it in movie production or theater production and television production, but it's an interesting part of what you have to get some learning. There's a little bit of a learning curve to a green screen. So getting some practice at an internship is very important early on, and especially if you're in college. To get, and I know people who have interned like every summer that they were in school and got better and better at practicing. So when it's time to create a resume reel, it looks pretty good. But you have a unique experience where while in college, you were also working at a private, a television station in a near Columbus, Ohio, right?
Right. There is a town called Zanesville, Ohio. It's a really small town. And my one friend, he worked there. He's a year older than me, so he graduated in 2023. And he was the weekday evening meteorologist. And he used to be, I'm not sure what his first schedule was, but he didn't start as that. But their chief left, so then he became the weekday evening. But then it was only him. So it was a lot of work for just one person. So he texted me, and he knew I was doing my internship. So he was like, send your reel to our news director once you're done. And then like maybe you could come and help, because he like needed another person. So I did the weekends there on Saturday, Sunday. And that was a great experience too. And it was a small market, so it wasn't too scary if I messed up or anything like that. Because it's not like there were thousands of people. Oh, I mean, there's still a lot of people watching, but it was a nice first place to start at.
Absolutely. There's an interesting trend, if you will, in the number of positions that are currently open in broadcast meteorology for weather, and the number of applicants that are out there. When you are in the hiring process, and by saying this, when we hired you, we had a lot of applicants, and many of them didn't even have television experience. They were just, I want to go do weather. So, it was like, there's a lot of applicants for each job, but to sort of have that combination of experience and talent and ambition and in the right place at the right time really matches up well in your particular case. But I would argue that I think there's, right now, it seems like there's to me, many jobs out there unfilled, and probably more graduates than there are job applicants, because I don't know, the hiring process right now is kind of interesting in this career field. With all that said, we were happy, I think, at WBOI in Clarksburg, very fortunate to have you at the time where it happened. You just graduated and you're ready to go to work, and you have ambition, which is something I want to talk about, because I think it's kind of rare at your age. I know at my age I was like walking around when I was your age, sort of aimless, like a leaf blowing in the wind. So I think, from my perspective, I think it's really it's super that you have not only the talent but also the ambition. And so to talk about what you think in regard to your, you've like you said, like we've said, you've been at this for a few months. Where do you go from here? What is? Have you given that some thought? And what do you think is where you'd like to take your career in 5 or 10 years, or perhaps there's a longer horizon end game for you?
Yeah, I would say I want to eventually end up working in Pittsburgh, but I feel like it'd kind of be fun to explore other places along the way. So I'm just going to see where the wind takes me for now. But I just started this job, so I still have a while here. So we'll see when the time comes. But yeah, I want to end up in Pittsburgh because my family's there. And my friends are there. Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
For sure. Would you talk about a little bit about like your daily routine, if you will, because your work schedule how you manage sort of the work-life balance, if there's such a thing, and what do you kind of do personally to keep that in perspective to the rest of your life? If you could, just spend a little bit of time talking about that.
Yeah, so my whole daily routine, I do the morning, so I wake up around 2:15 a.m. And then I try to get to work between 3 and 3:30. I feel like most consistently it's been like 3:15, 3:20. And then we officially start our broadcast at 5, but we start doing things before that at 4:45. But I start forecasting when I get there and all that. And then I take a 1 hour lunch break, and then I end my workday at 12:30. Um, but yeah, once I leave work, I try to definitely keep a work-life balance. I try to not touch anything work-related after I'm done. Um, but I have a lot of different hobbies, so that helps to keep me not totally focused on work 24/7. Which I do find myself scrolling through Facebook and Twitter at home, and there's a lot of weather information I'm getting fed. But I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't mind that. But yeah, I do try to spend like maybe 1 hour a week writing down notes I've collected or information I've learned that I should keep in my back pocket just so I don't forget it. But yeah, and then I always try to see family or friends on the weekend to keep my work life balance.
Nice. Not to get too, I don't want, if you don't want to, but like, just what are some of your hobbies? Like I love to take walks, and I take walks with my dogs, when they decide to get off the couch. But maybe, I find it interesting because I work with a fella, and I had no idea this guy played guitar and sang. I had no idea until we no longer work together. And then I look up and there's videos of him playing guitars and singing, and I'm going, I didn't know that. So if I don't want to pry, and you don't have to say anything, but
No, I'll
maybe just
share.
talk a little bit practical. Maybe what do you do for hobby?
Well, my new favorite hobby is mountain biking. I bought a mountain bike when I moved here. So I always go to this one
We
state
have plenty
park
of
by,
mountains in West Virginia.
yeah. I always go to this one park by Morgantown that's really popular. And I mountain bike there probably once a week. I would like to go more, but I found that if I go more than once a week, that I don't have enough time to like cook or clean or do other things that I need to be doing, just because it's a far drive.
Yes.
And I have to make sure I sleep for at least 6 hours or I will not be feeling great. So that's my new hobby. I also like to hike and walk. And I do also play the cello. I kept my cello at my parents' house the whole time I was in college, and I only touched it during the holidays because my parents would make us do a Christmas concert. But I actually brought it here with me this past weekend, so now I'm going to do that in
Wow.
my free time. Hopefully, I won't bother my neighbors too much.
Again, I had no idea that you played the cello, or you may have said that, but I had
No, I don't
forgotten.
think I ever mentioned that because I haven't touched it in a while. I also played the piano, but I don't have a piano here, and I don't plan on getting one because those are larger. The cello only weighs like 5 pounds, even though it's a little bit bulky, but it's easier to transport versus a piano is I don't know how much it weighs, but it's a lot heavier.
Well, you get one of those cool new electronic boards with your
Yeah,
headphones, and you'll be able
true,
to hear it.
true.
That's cool. So that is an interesting, and I'm at, one thing that I have found is when you can get into at a hobby like a cello or guitar, that it just allows you to kind of channel that a bit of that creativity, and you're not locked into your work, and it allows you. It's almost like an escape, if you will. It just gives you a little peace and a regenerative mind thing. I don't know if you think about it that way. I do as well. I think a big long walk where you can just think and just run through your ideas is really helpful. I don't know if you pull that from playing the cello or not, but it sounds like it could be.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was talking to my one friend about it, how whenever you do a workout or you do something else that requires all of your brain activity, she was a psychology major and she was like, yeah, that's a thing called flow, where your brain's in a flow and then you forget everything else on the outside. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
I have heard a lot of the state of flow lately. Maybe just in the last month, I've heard that more as a phrase than I've ever heard before. And so I've done some research on that, and it's kind of interesting because a lot of the brain scientists out there, whether it's psychologists or psychiatrists or just the people who are studying the interactions between the brain and thought and whatnot, that word comes up a lot. the state of flow. And so, and prior to maybe a month ago, I'd never never heard of it, which is probably on me because I don't, I'm expanding my mind just a little bit. I heard a story one time that some brain scientists put all the little, diodes or whatever they're called on pianists, and then they brain mapped pianists as they played like a concert piece, and were able to identify what part of the brains lit up, and then they took the pianos away, and they just asked the pianist to imagine playing the piano, and the same parts of the brain lit up. And so the brain has this way to map that creative part of it. And I think it's sort of illustrative that you can think your way, if you will, into perhaps that flow state, even without the instrument or the walk or something like that. I imagine that. I'm still doing some research on that, but I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's an interesting study, and the guy, he's a the neural science of the brain is fascinating to me. Tell me a little bit about your you mentioned you get up at 2:15 and you're at work at 3:15 or 3:30, and you get into that workflow. That is, I've done that morning schedule. It is not easy. I know you've been at it now for a few months. What do you find as maybe being the hardest part of that?
The hardest part, I would say, well, this has to deal more with the broadcasting part, I guess. I've noticed, so say we have a span of really nice weather for 5 days, but then all of a sudden it changes, and then it's like, then we have to start talking about, storms and low pressure centers. I noticed that I get too much into a habit of just being on autopilot mode. So like one day I was like, oh, here's a high pressure center, but it was a low pressure center because it was about to start raining, but there was a high pressure center for like 5 days. So I have to remind myself not to let my brain just shut off when I'm in front of the screen sometimes. And I have to actually think of what I'm saying, which I think I saved myself from that one circumstance fine because there was a high pressure center in the Midwest. So I pointed at that one once I realized I said the wrong word. But I would say not to let my brain and my words get too comfortable in the pattern that they did the day before or the multiple days before that would be the hardest thing. But also,
Yeah.
it's hard. There's so much information everywhere. So I did find myself going through Facebook between hits sometimes to see what other people are talking about, which is sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Because sometimes I get distracted, and then sometimes it's good because then I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was happening. Now I know that's going on. So now I'll talk about it too. But yeah.
Yeah, the thing, and hopefully this is not going to be your case, but the thing that I found the hardest about the morning schedule was the diet. Because people would constantly bring in food in the mornings, and typically it wasn't really the best food to eat. Usually it revolved around some sort of a biscuit, and I would or a donut, and so I would gladly eat them. And so I found that staying on a healthy diet for me was very difficult when I worked a morning schedule. And then sort of 1A and 1B was the sleep schedule, because when you have to be up at that hour of the morning, it means you have to go to sleep much earlier than you're likely used to, and just about anybody else. And so can you talk a little bit about your sleep schedule and how that has changed over the last year?
Yeah. I try to go to bed around 7:30. It's not always successful. I would say it ranges between 6 and 8, which is kind of a big range, but it just depends on what else I'm doing that day. But as long as I get 6 hours of sleep, then I'm good. If I get any less than that, then I quickly learned with this job that any less than that for me, I know everyone's different. I couldn't function very well
Yeah.
with less than
No, I
six
agree.
hours, which during school, I was able to do that, but I think that's because I was more on the same rhythm as everyone else, and also with the sunrise and sunset, which
Yeah.
now I guess I'm on the same schedule as the sunset because it's around 7-ish.
Yeah,
But
the
in the
northern,
summertime, it was hard because it would be light outside when I was trying to go to bed, and I don't have blackout curtains, so I just suffered.
yeah,
But it was all right.
it's tough, and no matter what people do or say about using some like white noise apps and things like that, I never found those to be useful. When I had to, try to get to sleep early enough, I would just, and so I'd usually be staying up. If I'm getting up at 2:15 or 2:30, there were many times that I wouldn't be asleep before 9:30 or 10, and I might take a nap with air quotes around it in the afternoon. But it really, eventually that wore down. It's not easy to keep up that schedule. So it's good to have a routine of getting a long enough sleep, and I think that's very key
Yeah.
because it keeps your mental acuity, throughout your day. One thing that I have found over my years, and like in your particular work schedule, you have a morning newscast, couple of hours, you've got some other stuff you do the next couple of hours, a bit of a break, and then there's another newscast, a lunchtime newscast. And that's the end of your day, pretty much, is when you're done with that, you're done. And in many cases, many people's jobs, when they're done with their workday, they can, they're getting their desk organized and they're putting their papers in the drawers and everything looks good, and they can just, they're done. But the end of your workday or mine, the last thing you do is a performance, is a communication broadcast where you have to. It may be the end of the day, but it's not the end of your need to be locked in and doing a weather forecast on television. So I have always found that a bit challenging. That the end of your day sometimes needs to be the top of your game type of thing. And I know that you're just a few months into your career, but have you found that to be challenging in that last newscast at lunchtime?
I think I would agree because I've noticed in the morning there's so many weather hits. So by the time I'm at the third one, my brain is like, okay, this is what we're talking about today. And then the rest of the ones for the day are pretty good. But with the break, then my brain kind of forgets what's happening. So then I go to do the 3.5 minute weathercast, and it's definitely more rough than the morning ones because the break kind of unset everything here, I guess.
You sort of back it up a little bit. Yeah, no, I get
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that is more challenging. I haven't thought about that, but yeah, now that you point that out, I do agree.
Yeah, I mean, and some, not everybody's job is different, but if you have let's just say you're working in some sort of a finance job, or you're working as a banker at a mortgage department or something like that, and at the end of your day, you're done and you go. But at the end of our day and your day, you have one more weathercast that you have to put on the air. So there's a bit of a challenge there. I always found that to be the case, that you're wrapping up your day perhaps with your most important forecast, especially if there's severe weather or something coming in and there's lots of people watching type of deal. Social media has changed the landscape of everything, but it's been a very important change in television. When I started, there was no social media. That's how old I am. And when it began as a thing, so like mid 2000s, when Facebook and the iPhone and Twitter at the time, Instagram later on, everybody was trying to figure out a way to leverage that. And so more and more broadcast entities, television stations say, yeah, you got to put stuff here on Facebook and you have to put it now on X, or you need to put it, or TikTok or things like that. And it changed the landscape. The culture has changed a lot because of technology. As I began my career, in most TV, in most towns, there was just a couple of TV stations. Cable penetration was, everybody didn't have cable. They picked up the television broadcast off of an antenna, and you only had a few stations to watch. So the attention was really focused on those newscasts. But now the attention is spread out across social media. And so I don't know if this ever came up at the college level for you, but has any of that been a bit of a challenge or interesting or more unexpected, that there's such a a a wide world, a universe in social media to put weather information out. Have you has you thought about that or understood any of that?
Yeah, I do use social media. In my generation, it's a huge thing. I definitely have my more favorite apps over other apps. I will say I don't like using X. I don't know why. I never have. I've always had Instagram since I was like probably 13 or something, and TikTok I got when it just came out, but X I didn't even make an account until I think last summer. Um, so yeah, I try to post on Facebook at least once a day. Usually I would say my average is two or three times a day. And then I try to make a TikTok every other day. Um, but yeah, I feel like social media just evolves so quickly. So sometimes by the time that I get on the wave, it's changes again.
Yeah, I
um,
think you're right.
yeah,
Yeah.
but at least we're trying. So and putting stuff out there for people to see because a lot of people my age don't even watch TV. They get their information from social media, so it's good for those people in that generation to still know what's going on from reliable sources that usually would tell it on TV. So I think
And
it's
I think,
helpful.
yeah, I think that's important, what you just said about being a reliable source, because just within the last month or so, with the various hurricanes, stuff will come out on social media and then get shared. Some people just mindlessly sharing information that's completely wrong. Uh, and so it's up to the user to kind of do some due diligence and figure out, is this a right post or not? Is this true? Even as recently as today, one of my brothers shared when we're recording this particular podcast, there is a large hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. But my brother shared a post from last night about some guy doing some Alexa test about Hurricane Milton. And the so it got shared. The Alexa had, and who knows if they had created an Alexa voice to make it sound like it was really Alexa or Siri or whatever, but it came out sounding like they were already predicting the hurricane to hit Florida and mass devastation, and it hasn't even come out of the Gulf yet, right? But it's been shared millions of times now, and so you can't reel that back in because once it's out there, it's out there. So I think it's important, like you said, that as a reliable source, the information that you post to social media is accurate and it's true and it's reliable, so that when someone consumes it, they know what they're getting is the truth is as good as we can get. But I'm just saying this sort of on a little bit of a pedestal preachy here. You just got to be careful out there, and we have to be careful about what we like or share or do stuff like that as well.
I totally agree. And I definitely have seen a lot of stuff recently, especially with Helene just happening. And people were scared, so then people were just posting random models for likes and views. So
Yeah.
not everyone has the right intention when it comes to weather information, but
A
yeah.
friend of mine once called them, rather than meteorologists, they were mediaologists. They just use social media to post out these weather things, and it's clickbait. It's just to get people to websites. And when you think of it in that way, that they're just trying to run their business the best they can, and so that is their method of getting engagement. Understandable. I think as a consumer, we just have to be careful, as us as consumers, and then people who are consuming it, and they have to look at, is this an AI generated image? you know, is this truth? Is this just clickbait? So it is very important to get to the core source. Look at the Hurricane Center. Look at the Weather Service. Trust your local meteorologist. Does to get their information. Um, you talked about the hard part in regard to getting your day started right, and your sleep schedule. So I wanted to come back to that. So far, and again, you're just a few months in. What have you liked the most about what you're doing?
Um, what I like the most, I would say, is getting to learn. That probably sounds cliche. Um, but I feel like I learn something new every day, so that's really interesting. And I also like science, which I get to do every day too. And I have great coworkers who are super fun, so they always brighten my day as well. So it's been great, and there's a lot of freedom too with it. You know, obviously I have to stay with the gist and have the graphics I need, but I could still have the freedom to add a fun one in or switch something up a little bit if I'm getting bored of a pattern that I was stuck in, things like that. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I like the fact that early on you do see the advantage of your own creativity, because that's a marketable skill, and I don't want to break it down into these sort of consumeristic chunks, but our job is to present our forecast in a way where people can see it, they can hear it, they can understand it, and it's our job to make it as understandable as possible, but also base it on science and fact as best we can. And the thing that for me, that's always interesting as a veteran broadcast meteorologist is that even though you're in the midst of perhaps a stretch of 7 days where nothing's changed, there's still a way to tell that story differently every single day, because you never know if someone's watching you for the very first time. And so they have no idea that you may have just said this yesterday or the day before. So I have always used advice that was given to me when I first started, that every day is an audition. Every day on television as a meteorologist, or really in any broadcast career, is an audition, because you never know if someone's watching you for the very first time. And this is a great way to make your first impression. And then you may have gained a viewer who then will tell somebody else, and it's just a way to build and generate your audience. So I like the fact that even early on you identify that you do have some time to kind of be creative, make it interesting, and I think that shows up in your work as a critique. It shows up in your work, and I think it's dynamic, which I think is really good too.
Yeah. My one favorite one that sticks out in my head was it was one of our anchor's birthday and it was a sunny day and she's always a very happy person. So I just put her face in the middle of a sunshine graphic and I was like, oh, she brought the sun for her birthday. Forecast is sunny again, even though there was a high pressure center for days, I'm pretty sure. So it was the same, but then you just find a way to make it different.
We have not, as a team, had to work through many severe weather events yet, or big snowstorms yet, but I'm sure that will happen. One of the things that the job challenges us is to produce sort of information when it comes to property life-saving information. You haven't, at this point in your career, had to work through any severe weather events where that's challenging people's property or livelihood. But you saw what happened in western North Carolina with the floods there, and with Hurricane Helene. Talk a bit about what you think and this is sort of an exercise in sort of preparation as a professional meteorologist. What do you think, as you see all that, how do you think you'd feel if you were working in the midst of that as a TV meteorologist? What is your sort of gut feeling about how things you would have been able to interact like that? I don't know. It's sort of a broad question, and it's asking something that can't happen or hasn't happened. But if you could just provide a sense of how you would see yourself working in a situation like that.
Right. So I would say from starting with the forecasting before the event, I would obviously try to put as much information out there as I can, and also on all platforms, because I saw people posting like, oh, we didn't know. And then the meteorologists are like, oh, we tried our best, but now we know we should try even harder to get things out on all platforms because not everyone watches the TV. So people were reflecting and were like, maybe we should post more on Facebook and more on, which people do, but I guess in more volumes. So I would try to get all the information out there. And then after the event happened, obviously it was really devastating. So obviously I would be upset and, be thinking about all of the victims. And then I would say that I would try to help give donations, be there for people because people want to share their stories. So if they want to message you, be there's someone to listen. So yeah, I would say that, and then just try to be there for next time for an event like that to happen again, to make people aware and try to prepare them as best as possible is what I feel like my game plan would be.
Yeah, I would say that as your career advances, situations like that would come up, and I think it's important to kind of go ahead and make a mental plan. How am I going to handle this? And I think it's a great point you just made about to talk to people who want their stories to be told or shared, because you have a unique, we all do in our profession, a unique ability to connect our science to an event that affects everybody. And whether we predict it correctly or we're spot on with a forecast, what's important though after that is to relate it to what whomever may have been in the path, because you have created a connection or a bond with your broadcast and with your accuracy or with your attention to detail or just living in the community. That bond is, for some, that's all they may hold. It's like, oh yeah, we know you, we watch you on TV, let me tell my story. And you're there for that as just a vehicle to get that story out. I think in the future, as you move through your career, that's going to be an opportunity for you, not only on television, but like you said, on the social media platforms, because so many people consume things, and you can get condensed, very emotion dense condensation of information in a short period of time, whether it's in an Instagram post or Facebook post. So look forward, you're thinking about it, and I would say make that part of your future plan if this is where you're going. I say that out loud because I lived and worked through a hurricane that, while we all knew it was coming, it was hard to really fathom the extent of the damage and the devastation. And no matter what you do to prepare for it, sometimes you're completely unprepared as a professional meteorologist to be ready for the scope of the event. And so I would urge and encourage a sort of, like, everybody has a hurricane preparedness list, where they get your water and whatnot. As a professional meteorologist, keep that in your back pocket. Here's what I'm going to do if this happens, and here's what I'm going to do after this happens, that kind of thing. I think that's a great point that you made about just kind of being ready to share with the community after the event is over. It's a good point.
And then also, one other thing I thought of while you're talking is beforehand, people have lots of questions, which they can't always just Google. So to be answering as many people's questions as possible is another thing that I feel like is important, since you're a reliable scientific source. So yeah.
One thing I fail at miserably is the engagement. I think, all right, I put my forecast up. There you go. Enjoy it. But it's the questions that follow that up that really build the rapport with whatever platform you're on, or just the community. Someone who's just at home, and sees, oh look, they posted up, like last night. This is going to be when this particular podcast airs, it'll probably be long beyond when it happened. But there was a cold front coming in, and there were tremendous thunderstorms in Pittsburgh last night when there was a football game between the Steelers and the Cowboys. And so early in the morning of this game, I was putting out stuff saying, hey, storms are rolling in. And then I think way prior to when the game started, I said there's a pretty good chance this game's going to be delayed because of storms and lightning. And the announcer, when the game was delayed, the announcer said, who would have thought that weather would have an impact on tonight's game? And we're all going, what was he talking about? But he didn't get by post, I guess, is what happened. But I guess
Yeah.
the point being is you never know, that engagement part and following up with somebody who may comment on a post. So just a random thought, but if Mike Tirico would have, no, sorry, I shouldn't have said the name of the announcer. If that announcer would have checked my post from WBOI.com's Facebook or X post, he would have known that lightning was coming in. But anyway, just a thought.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, we've had, I'm shockingly to say, 3/4 of an hour here, so that's pretty good. I appreciate your time today. What I want to do is just let you know that and again, this is sort of an early stage for me in this project of podcast, but I wanted to get someone like yourself, people that I've worked with, other meteorologists from across the country that I know or don't even know, so my warm list and my cold list, to get stories told like yours and theirs out there so people can learn more about you, The job they see on television, where they see the posts, but I think it's really important, and why I wanted to do this podcast project is to tell your story, about how you got where you are, and your story's gonna evolve obviously through your career. So I want to sort of close out with a quick question in regard to the future for you. And I know we touched on it earlier, but is this a career that you can envision yourself doing for a long period of time? There's no right or wrong answer on this, but is this something you want to do forever? I guess is the question.
I would say yeah. I feel like when I get older, like I want to have a family and everything, so I feel like that might be slightly difficult, but I've seen other people do it, so I feel like it'll be fine. And you can work around the hurdles. So I would say yeah. I think it's a lot of fun. It's what I love to do.
That's a good answer. See, there are no wrong answers, so I
hmm
appreciate that.
Which I have no idea what the future holds. I mean, obviously I have a plan for myself, but obviously the universe throws things at you that you can't expect. So
Yeah, and you just start, you duck and cover, and dodge it, see what, wait for the next one to come on. You're absolutely right. The next storm that might be coming your way. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time today.
wait,
And
can I ask you a question first before it's over?
sure,
Okay,
yeah.
what's this is kind of a broad question, I guess, but what's one thing that you knew when you were my age, or one thing that you wish you knew when you were my age,
Oh,
when you were first starting your career, that you know now?
a couple of things. Great question. I would have saved and recorded and documented my work much more than I did. I think egotistically, I probably said, "Well, I don't, I don't need to save that stuff. What I there is a thing that I think about now is that I don't have some of my early work to show my kids. They didn't see me work when I first started out, so they didn't see what I was doing when I was their age. Frankly, my oldest son is the age I was when I started working. And so I would have definitely, see, now it's easy. You've got digital files and you can save them in the cloud. Back then you had to record it on videotape and save the tapes. So I should have done that. And also, I would have told my younger self to invest more in the community. Get to know the people that you live with and you work with, and also your town, and become, don't just live in the town you work in. My late father-in-law used to say, you either work where you live or you live where you work. And it's better to live where you work, because that way you're living, you know. And so I would, you feel like you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof when you're young, and you go, that'll be fine, I'll just move on to the next job in the next town or whatnot. But I think in retrospect, I would have liked to have been more intentional with my community relationship, with friendships to build in that place where I was living, and then also save my early work for posterity.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing.
I guess that's the right. That's a great question, because I hadn't really thought about that until you asked that question. But those are that's the two things that popped up, so that's what came out. So
Yeah.
good question.
Because young people like me see you as having all the secrets to life since you've been doing this for many, many years. So it's
Well,
always great to hear your insight.
I appreciate that. And we've talked about this in the past. I've got a big old trunk full of experience, but what good is it going to do me to end my career and not pass it on, and not offer up some guidance or some counseling or some wisdom or any sort of thing that I can pass on that might make this job easier or better or enhanced. And so that's part of this project, is that I want to make sure that people's stories are told, and then that can help sort of future generations, and also to save your legacy. Because once this is recorded and published, then we've saved it, and that story can then be told way out into the future, and that's the reason. That is really the reason why I want to do the Weather School podcast project. So yeah, that's why we're here.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to be part of this podcast journey.
Well, I'm glad that you're there as well. So I think that'll do it. I'm not sure how you're supposed to end this thing, so we'll just say thanks, and I'm going to hit stop. All right. Please be sure to follow me on Skool.com, become a Weather School community member, and check back here often for the latest episode of the Weather School podcast project. Links to everything will be available in the show notes. Thanks again. Be well.